Hello, hello. Didn't realize it was already working. Good morning, everybody. Let's see. Hey, Neil. How's it going? Cool. We're live. Great. Let me just sort out the chat first. Cool. All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the stream. How you doing, Blue Phoenix? Don't know how to pronounce that. Just finishing my coffee. How's it going? Night Shadow. Hello, Pablo. What's going on? Still enjoying our extra mail content. Your extra mail content in the extra ZBrush module. Cool. The extra tips. Cool. Hey, Steven. How's it going? Cool. All right. So everything seems to be working fine, audio and video wise. The chat as well is coming through. Cool. Alrighty. So here's the little guide that we started. It looks like an egg right now, a fairy egg. But this is the guide that we started last stream. It's not a project that I want to take like too much further than what we're going to do today. But I think it's a good opportunity to show you some tips and tricks and some very simple things that you can do with fiber mesh to get a really nice looking fur or hair. Not too much in the grooming or stylizing it. I don't know, that's a thing, but like if you wanted to stylize it and groom it and comb it and create a very particular hairstyle, it might not be might be ideal the way that I'm going to show you. It's more about tweaking the settings before you commit to accept them, in a way, to create them. So it's less about the grooming, more about the creation of the fibers. The grooming is slightly, a different process. If I were to groom some of these fibers, like let's say if I create the fibers and I want to groom them more like properly to create a hairstyle, for example, I wouldn't spend as much time in the settings side of things, because ultimately when you start pushing and pulling things, then you will destroy or override these settings. So hopefully you'll get something out of it. Hi Winston, how's it going? Alex, how you doing? Like a nesting egg. Yeah, that's right. Hey Boyson. Hey Javi, how's it going? Good to have you here. Yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. I was gonna show you. Oh yeah. So I have let me just show you the references that I'm using. So I'm using a little software that you're probably familiar with. It's called PureRef. This is my go-to software now for references right now, and I have a bunch of little macaques here, or Japanese monkeys, or snow monkeys also. That's how they refer to them. So the reason I'm mentioning this software is because I have it in a mode so that I can work on ZBrush as well. The only problem is that the chat and everything is, and the camera is on top of it. Doesn't really matter. Doesn't make a difference. Let me just put it here for the time being so you can see it better. So with this PureRef, if I right click and then I go to mode, there is this option that I use all the time called always on top. That means that this window will stay on top and I can just work on whatever is behind it, and this is always going to be on top. So what I do sometimes is just put these little references on the side, pretty much where I have the chat and the camera right now, and I have the character on the other side, and I can just do these sort of things. Now what's also great about it is that I have a few controls and shortcuts, and I'm not going to get into this because it's fairly straightforward, but I have that mapped to my pen in the Wacom as well as the remote control. So that allows me to just simply, without having to move between screens, although I have a couple on each side, or monitors, is just go into this one, click, and then I can, using the middle mouse button, just move around and find a different reference. I also have the zoom in and out mapped here, so it's fairly convenient, to be honest, to just work this way, and that I can just maintain or keep an eye on the reference as I work. So this is really cool. You can also set this as transparent mode, so you can sort of overlay them on top. I don't particularly like that, but there you go. Just in case you were wondering, and before we get to the question that is always asked, the one that I'm going to be using for drawing on the screen, this one, it's called Epic Pen, and it's a free software as well, the same as PureRef. So just so you know. Cool. Let's get into this thing. Like I said, I don't want to spend too much time, or I don't want to take this any further than what I already have here. In a way, I just want to polish it a little bit, and it's going to be a fairly like a good close-up of this stylized monkey. So let me just actually, I'm going to put this out of the way so that it doesn't bother you guys. I don't know if you can still see it on the recording here. It's not very easy to see, but I'll keep the reference here on this side. Just gonna find a fairly good one to reference some of the wrinkles. Hopefully you can see there's a massive head of a monkey right there. Let's see. The images that I collected, they don't have like a great resolution. Let's see. Alright, so I think this one is going to work fine. Alright, cool. So like I mentioned in the previous stream, if you didn't watch it, we essentially started with this. And let me just turn this off. Alright, so we started with this, just a series of very simple shapes, extremely rough, and then I just created the fibers in the last 10 seconds of the stream, less than 10 minutes to create those. So I just said that these one were going to be just like a placeholder. So what I can do right now is create a folder. I'm going to call it temp fibers. Not that one, sorry, not rename. New folder, temp fibers, as temporary, or that I'm not going to use. I don't want to destroy them because they look alright. I might groom it a little bit, but I don't want to use fibers in this way. You'll see in just a second. I'm just going to put that at the top, turn it off. So I have the eyes, cool, and 3 other objects. Alright, so I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to concentrate on just on the head and on the face and the head. And all I want to do is just refine it a little bit. At this point, this is still like extremely rough, very, very sketchy. I just want to polish it a little bit more. Then we can just run a remeasure and then just add some detail with subdivision. And that is really all there is to it, really. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to use the move brush with an AccuCurve. So the AccuCurve for you guys should be under the curve sub-palette in the brush palette, and it just allows you to pull and push things a little bit easier. Alright, I'm also going to change to a Macaque gray, and I'm going to change the color, to be honest, just to be, it's easier to judge some of the volumes. In fact, you can go to this basic material that has a bit of a shine, and I use this all the time. So I switch between these ones and this plastic blue and yellow, depending on what I'm doing, because they have a semi-concentrated specular, and that allows you to judge the bumpiness and see all of these. I don't know if you can see it, but this bunch of bumpy surface here that it's easy to judge with this type of material than with this one, for example. You won't see many of those. Hang on. Probably. I don't know if it's too obvious for you guys in the video, but if I switch, so just pay attention to these circle areas. If I switch between this and that one, you see a little bit of it. Anyway, it's not a big deal. Anyway, so yeah, so let's go ahead and keep polishing this one. I'm gonna use the clay builder brush, and I'm gonna use a strong smooth, right? So the strong smooth is just going to be really, really strong. So that saves you a few extra clicks or putting too much pressure on your tablet if you're using a tablet. Let me just show you what that does as well in terms of the geometry. So if you have a lot of geometry in this case, it's not a lot, but you know, it's fairly dense. So that helps you to simplify it or smooth everything very fast. So with the clay builder brush, I'll just use this to add a little bit of volume. And I like this brush because obviously it builds up really quickly, volume, but it also has a very subtle sensitivity to the pressure. So it allows you to just apply a little bit of pressure and then get these areas. So all I'm doing here is just pressing Alt sometimes to sort of carve in and refine the volumes a bit. And it looks more sketchy than before, than what I was doing, and that's just because the way that this brush works and the alpha that it has. But then I can use this smooth strong and then just clear this up a little bit, and that's it. That's essentially it. Just gonna concentrate here on the nose a little bit more. And I want to maintain kind of like the cartoonish look of this character, as well as, I mean, that's the other reason why I want to do something fairly different with the fibers, rather than the usual, you know, kind of like realistic hair that you can get. Just something to match this the style of this character. And you'll notice as well that I'm looking at the references, and based on the wrinkles of the face, I'm also trying to follow certain flow. So with the clay builder brush, I'm trying to sort of go in this direction. Obviously, I'm using symmetry as well. So that's another thing that I will just pay attention when I'm doing this, or at this stage, at this step. I will just try to follow certain flow of the anatomy or the muscles while I'm doing the clay builder brush. And the reason I'm doing that is because if I wanna get into details or sketch details and prototype the details and see if I like them, I can do something very easy to get all these details without too much work. Again, just as a prototype, and it's fairly simple. All I have to do in this case, since I'm working in this fashion, let's just do a few more so that you get a better idea of what I'm talking about. So I'm building the volumes and refining the shapes, right, with the clay builder brush as I go, but also thinking about certain fluidity of these muscles and the anatomy. So you'll see what I mean in just a second. Right. So at this point, let's say that this is fairly, you know, let's say that this is already refined, right? I'm not going to spend much time on this. If I go with the smooth strong, I will pretty much clear all these details, and I end up with a more sort of refined volume, right? I'm going to undo that because that's just basically refining what I showed you before. And then what I was mentioning about the sculpting, kind of like in maintaining a flow. I don't do this all the time, just as a final refinement, and if I want to prototype the details, like I said. So what I do is just change to a different smooth brush, which is the smooth peaks that I have here in my palette. For you guys, it should be already loaded by default. It's this one right here, smooth peaks. And what this one will do is smooth everything but the crevices. So if you pay attention to maybe this area here, I'm also gonna hold shift, right click, and change the intensity a bit, so that is not 100% the smoothness effect. So if I start doing that over this area, you'll see I start to polish, and I'm not applying too much pressure, but I can start to sort of smooth everything and polish it, but some of the crevices that I got from the clay builder brush are going to be kept, right? And that is what I mean about prototyping the details. So just to see if the placement of these volumes are going to work or not. So in a way, you're polishing it, but you know, you're getting all of these extra details for free, in a way. Which, if you like them, then you can just go ahead and further refine those with the damp standard brush. You know, just go over the ones that you think work, and so on and so forth. So that is pretty much the idea. All right, so I'm just gonna keep it simple. Just looking at the references here. I'm gonna use the damp standard brush to add a few wrinkles, kind of like the main wrinkles or the main volumes, I guess, or to define the main wrinkles. Sorry. But I'm gonna keep it simple and subtle in a way. I don't want to make it super wrinkly and realistic. It's just a rough idea. All right, so there's a few more wrinkles that get created kind of like in this fashion, or would be the equivalent of this area in this cartoonish style. All right, I think I'm going to switch to the smooth strong just to refine this area. Because again, I don't want them to be really, really strong, just a suggestion of it. These are gonna be the strongest ones, or the main. If you were to categorize these lines or these wrinkles in primary, secondary, and tertiary shapes, to me wrinkles are kind of like the tertiary, right? The tertiary shapes. But if you wanna create a subcategory, I would say these specific wrinkles that I'm doing are kind of like the primary shapes. The primary shapes of the wrinkles. So like the ones that are going to kind of like dictate the flow, or the ones that you would see without expression. Maybe that's a good way to put it. So if so they're kind of like the wrinkles that will be formed over time, with time really. So that's the idea here. And the reason I mention this is because those wrinkles would be present, or would be easy to identify those without any expression. And then you can add more, or accentuate the same ones if you want to add an expression. Hopefully that makes sense. All right. So I'm just gonna do a couple more. I'm not trying to make something very kind of like feature-like, or like very prominent, because I'm still with symmetry. So I will get out of symmetry and do a few more in just a second. In fact, I'm not gonna get out of symmetry just yet, because I'm gonna retopologize this really quickly with remeasure to get something working, and then use the subdivision approach or method to continue the refinement of the well, adding details really, because the refinement is, once we do the remesh with remeasure, it's going to be fairly simple to refine it, because we're going to have not a lot of geometry, and we can use the smooth strong to get us there. Okay, I'm going to bring in this standard brush a bit. I'm just going to accentuate the lips a bit. And I'm just going to mask the bottom part with the mask lasso. Keep it more. Cool. And then I'm going to use the move brush to just push it down. Maybe with a larger brush size. And again, this looks a little bit, I don't know, wobbly, but this is the type of things that we will be able to fine tune with a lower resolution mesh when we do the remeasure. All right, I'm gonna clear that mask. Let me check the chat. Hey Paul, how's it going? Nice of your work, thank you so much. Yes, I made it. Never used smooth peaks before. What a great brush. Yeah, Neil, it's awesome. There are two actually that if you can use. So you can use the smooth peaks and the smooth valleys. The smooth valleys will do the same thing. So smooth peaks works really well if you're doing kind of like something with a high level of porosity, like an old bone, for example. It will work really well. Or if you do something like if you're refining a surface but you want to maintain certain level of grain and surface detail but like polish it, you can use the invert smooth, which is the smooth valleys, and that will polish the surface and leave like little pieces, just very detailed surface. So it's really cool. So let's go ahead and do a quick remesh of this, and I'm thinking that we could just combine these two together, like the head itself. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to do the same process that I do just in case I want to go back. So I'm gonna duplicate my head, my face, duplicate my head, and let's go ahead and just chuck these two into the original folder. And then we can use these two, just merge them down. Okay. So now, let's clear the mask. So now this is a single subtool, but it's still two separate meshes, right? So if I go into the poly mesh, I can hold Control and Shift and select this one. Oh, let me just turn this one off. There we go. And then the other one will be hidden, right? So that's pretty straightforward. So what I need to do is remesh everything, so that I can, not remesh, run a Dynamesh so that everything fits together. Now the problem with the Dynamesh at this point is that we had a fairly decent resolution. Let's say, this is an important concept that I think it's a good tip that will help you quite a bit. So we have this mesh at a, let's say at a, I don't know, let's say at 100% or 100 polygons, 100 points, just to give you an idea, right? And then we had this other one that has, I don't know, 50 points, right? So when we merge these two together, obviously we're gonna get these much points, right, or polygons. So if we run the Dynamesh at this resolution again, pardon me, we're going to ZBrush is gonna equalize or average everything. So we're gonna get more polygons here, but less polygons here. So that it's gonna be an average. So we're gonna lose a few of these details, and this area that we don't need it to be that detail is gonna have more polygons. Hopefully that makes sense. But essentially what I'm saying is that if you use Dynamesh right now, at this point, we're gonna lose a few of these details because ZBrush is gonna create an average of the amount of polygons that we currently have with the Dynamesh resolution that we have set for this mesh. So an easy workaround, which is my preferred method in this particular case for this type of projects, would be to use the remesh by union. I remember that's the name. I'll check in a second. But that allows you to basically run a union Boolean mesh, or a union Boolean process within your selected subtool. So that way it becomes a single mesh, so that all of these points, all of these lines around are going to be connected. So for instance, if I bring, let's just do it. I'm going to bring in the gizmo. I don't know why I think I had a accept that. All right. So yeah, so I have a gizmo which I'm selecting the entire subtool. So if I go to the, I'm actually going to look at this area. Just pay attention to this border as I run this process. So I'm going to click on the cog icon. Yeah, I'm going to click on the cog icon, and it's called, I always lose it. Yeah, remesh by union. Right, so I'm going to click remesh by union. And there's some mask, symmetry. Let me turn off symmetry. It only works without symmetry. There we go. And ZBrush is going to run this operation. So you saw, well, now it's very clear that ZBrush sort of merged these two meshes together, right? But because we used that kind of like Boolean operation, and we had a lot of geometry on this side and less geometry on the other side, on the other mesh, ZBrush sort of connected it this way with these triangles. So kind of like a useless geometry right now, but all we need is to create a single mesh so that we can remesh it without losing the details that we already established. So let's click on this cog icon to accept. And I can just get rid of that. And hopefully that process made sense. Just to make it more obvious is if I hold control, I mean, we kept all the poly frames. So if I hold control and shift and click on it, and maybe turn double, you'll see that it's kind of like hollow, right? So this could also be an interesting way to make things hollow and then just add thickness if you want to do 3D printing, for example. Just a thought. Not that I'm doing that. I will do it a little bit more thoroughly than this. Alright, so let's bring back everything together. So here, what I can do to soften this area, if I wanted to, like I said, it doesn't make like a huge difference because this is going to be covered by fur and we're going to do a remesh. But if you wanted to simplify these lines so it's not as harsh, a very simple thing you can do is select the smooth brush. I'm going to turn the symmetry again, and I'm going to enable Sculptris Pro. So right now I have the move brush, and the Sculptris Pro doesn't work with the move brush. That's why it's grayed out. But if I hold shift, you can access it. So I'm going to turn it on for the smooth brush. And if I turn on my polyframe, you'll see what this is going to do. I'm going to reduce the brush size so that I add more, holding shift. So I'm basically fixing up this line that was created with the remesh by union. I turn this off now, and you'll see it's getting a bit smoother. So that is the idea of this process. And the only reason, again, I went ahead and did that with the remesh by union and all that is so that I can keep some of these, smaller volumes and lines for the ZRemesher without compromising it once I had this put together. Okay, I think that's it. Go ahead, I'm going to turn this off, bring in the move brush. I already had it. And I'm just going to refine this a tiny bit, just push things. So one thing I'm not going to worry too much about is are the ears, because with these monkeys, I mean, obviously they have ears, but they're kind of like hard to see because the amount of fluffiness and the fur. So I'm going to exaggerate that anyway, so you won't be able to see that. All right. So now that I have these, I'm going to duplicate it once, and I'm going to turn this off. Right. So I have two duplicates. So with this one, with the duplicate, this is the one that I'm going to run the ZRemesher process. So I'm going to go ahead and maybe turn on polyframe. I'm going to hold Control and W to assign a single polygroup. And now I'm going to go to the geometry palette. Go to ZRemesher. And I'm going to make sure I have symmetry on. I'm going to leave adaptive on. And I'm going to click half. I'm going to give it a go and see how it works with the ZRemesher new algorithm from 2019. I've mentioned before that I prefer to keep it when I'm using something organic. I prefer to use the legacy, but since this character has kind of like a very well defined, in a way, defined planes, it might work really, really well. So let's just have a look. So yeah, I'm just gonna click ZRemesher without doing too much. That's it. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Blah. This coffee is very cold. Disgusting. All right. Cool. All right. So it did a fairly decent job. There are some very evident issues, I think. So I'm just gonna point them out here. It's hard to see, but there's a bit of a convoluted area in this section. This is not too bad, but I would prefer a better flow, and maybe these one are stretching a little bit too much. So it works, like it creates a nice set of polygons, but it could be improved. So let's go ahead and I'm not gonna move the camera, so I'm gonna lock it. Oops. I'm gonna lock it. So I'm gonna run the same process. I'm gonna run the same process already on top of this one, but with the legacy. So just see if that fixes anything. So I'm actually using both algorithms. So I'm using the new one first, just to get us going, and then I'm using the legacy one to fix it a little bit. But in all honesty, I think it should have been the other way around for organic stuff. So I would have used the legacy and then the other one. So yeah, as you can see, is for this type of things, I reckon the legacy works a little bit better. It might not give you a very like a perfect topology for animation or something like that, but it avoids certain like corners. That's why the ZBrush 3.0 works so well for hard surface stuff, because it just maintains like the edges and stuff. But if it is an organic, you'll see if I turn this on, these areas that the other algorithm didn't figure out as well is more consistent now. So it's probably also because I did the remesh on top of a already remesh or pre-remeshed mesh, but it works well. So I think I'm happy with this in terms of the topology. Let's go ahead and keep the half on, and I'm going to run it again just to reduce the polygon count. And I'm going to keep doing that a few times. Like, I wish I had a better kind of like, yeah, something more like that, like a better continuity in the polygons here around the eyes. Again, if you want something really accurate and really perfect for animation or doing like a game asset, nothing is gonna beat manual retopology, which you can do in ZBrush. But as a quick concept, this is just one-click operation. It's fantastic. So let's just do that one more time. So that looks pretty good. I kind of like this. The symmetry line. We have plenty of detail or resolution here around the eyes. Actually, let me just double check everything, because this one is not too bad at all. I mean, some of these areas here could be improved, but we won't even see that. So as a concept, this is pretty good. Okay, so I'm gonna turn this off, go back to Macaque gray, and there's one thing that I might have to check, which is this one right here, this area. So I'm probably going to turn on the other one. Yep. So I have the two, like the sketch and the remesh version here. I want to go into transparent mode and ghost. Just want to check how much of that volume I'm losing with the remeasure. So I can just go ahead and tweak it a tiny bit, just to suit the actual sketch a little bit more. That's all. That's really all we have to do at this point. For the most part, I think it just fits really nicely. So yeah, let's do that. So the first thing I want to do is project whatever I have in this first lowest subdivision level, and this works way better than subdividing it to get all the details and then subdivide it to get a lot of resolution and then project all the details, because again it's a fairly low mesh. Actually, it wouldn't be that bad at this point because we have a fair amount of resolution. But if you have something really, really low, then what I'm going to show you is actually the better approach, I think. So I'm going to turn off the eyes because I don't want to project any of the eyes. And this one is also off, so I'm just going to go project all. Then I'm going to divide that once, project all, divide another time, project all, divide one more time, project all. And the way that I can judge whether or not, so the way that I judge how many subdivisions levels I'm doing to project is whether or not I'm getting all of these artifacts in a way. So if I, let's just go ahead and, yeah, let's do that. Right. So I just turn on the poly paint so that you can see. When I start to see these random artifacts, like a lot of those, that means that the two surfaces are very close together. And so if, I mean, I know this is very basic, but just to give you an idea. So if you have, let's say if you see it from a side view, right? If you have the high resolution mesh, so this is the high resolution mesh, right? And then you have the red one, which is the low resolution mesh. And you just have a little bit of polygons like that. So let's say those are polygons in a way, right? So this is the low res or low mesh. If you look at from this angle that we are seeing it, you will see a tiny bit of this and a tiny bit of this, and then a tiny bit of that and a tiny bit of this, right? So you won't see as many artifacts. You will just see a little bit of that. I don't know if this makes any sense, but if I undo that, right, I'm gonna simplify it a bit more. So this is the high resolution mesh, and then the more subdivisions that we added in the low resolution mesh to project the details, the closer this is going to look in the surface. So you will have more of these little artifacts because there's the two surfaces are very close together and they're intersecting. So that's how I can judge how much subdivision I'm going to add, right? So you see, if I lower the subdivision, there's less artifacts, less and less, right? So I'm fairly confident that with all these artifacts that I can see here, the new resolution or the new mesh that has the retopology is going to maintain these details. So I can turn this off, and you'll see we have a pretty decent result that has the nice topology, right? So obviously, when we did the project, all the artifacts from the Dynamesh and Sculptris Pro. So here's where I'll just go. Let me turn eyes as well. Let's just leave it off. Here's where I can go with the smooth strong again. I'm gonna reduce the intensity so that I have more control with the pressure, and then just very quickly a good amount of resolution. I have 1 million polygons. If I needed to, I could very easily this only happens when I'm doing the stream, when I'm recording a tutorial or something. Recording, ZBrush struggles with the smooth brush. Expensive process in the processor or not, not sure. Anyway, I don't have to smooth this too much because you won't be able to see it. And cool. Alright, so I'm losing some of these details that we added before, but again, it's all in an effort to simplify the mesh a bit. We can also reduce that the subdivision level now that we have subdivision level, so that we keep it very clean. And maybe we can use the edge polish to refine some of these planes a bit more. Cool. All right. So I think that's looking pretty good. Might want to also refine this area a bit more, just with the edge polish and the smooth strong. Alright, let's go back to our fourth subdivision level. There's a weird thing in the eye, and that might be the result of the retopology process or the projection. So just gonna smooth this area here. There we go. And we probably have to, let's just bring in the eyes. Right, and I'm going to bring in the clay brush. Well, first let me just smooth all this area, just to polish it. Remember, I'm using the smooth strong, so this allows me to work really fast with a higher subdivision level or with plenty of resolution. And then, oops, with the clay brush, make sure that RGB is off. I'm just gonna refine these areas and create a little bit of the lacrimal here, just by pushing some geometry. I'm not gonna separate it or anything. A bit more. And of course we can use the move brush with the AccuCurve to just a quick save, because this is getting a little bit sluggish. All right, so I think that's it. We can go ahead and use, at this point, we could probably use symmetry off, bring in the damp standard brush. Let me just check the chat, just saw some movement there. Let's just have a look. You can use the guideline brush. You mean, Leo, just to do the retopology? Yeah, you absolutely can. I don't see, like, for this type of things that are really quick and easy, I don't use that much, but yeah, totally usable. So remeasure guide can fix that. I think you were talking about the guides around the eyes. Yeah, for sure. So does Sculptris Pro compromises C remeasure effectiveness? No, it really depends. It won't compromise the effectiveness of the C remeasure, but if you have, let's say, if you have a not as dense, like a mesh that is not very dense, and then you have you use the damp standard brush with Sculptris Pro enabled to add some crevices. The crevices, the difference in height and depth of the actual polygons is going to be taken into account when Cirrus does the C remeasure, but not necessarily because of the Sculptris Pro. The Sculptris Pro is just enabling you to add those details. So C remeasure is going to evaluate the surface, not whether or not some areas have more polygons or not. Hopefully that makes sense as well. Muchtato. Oh my gosh, is that from the new Lion King movie? No, it's just a little Japanese monkey. Quad curves. Yep, this is retopology. Cool. All right, so that's it. Let's go ahead and with symmetry off, I'm just gonna do some lines here, just to make some feature details. And of course, I'm just looking at the references. Actually, let me just put it here. It's gonna, the chat is gonna be overlaid on top of it, but At least you'll have a reference of what I'm doing. Another thing is you'll see that the lacrimal of these monkeys are actually pretty huge. It's kind of like black as well, which is interesting. But just gonna keep it simple. Right, so at this point, there's nothing really kind of like interesting to say about this. This is just sculpting really, and just placing details. So yeah, not much to say about this process. So well, please maybe we can talk about something else, like the Stranger Things latest series. I just finished it yesterday. It's absolutely fantastic. I love it. Pretty dramatic. It's a bit more. I think as the kids grow older, the gruesomeness it's also increasing, which is great. I love it. Not particular. I mean the design of the. Maybe I shouldn't say anything, because if you haven't watched it, I will ruin it. And it's yeah. No, I'm not gonna. Let's not talk about Stranger Things. It's just a good series. That's all. Because if you want to watch it, I don't want to ruin it for you. Around the eyelids, because they have very wrinkly eyes. But then all the next ones will be kind of like across these main wrinkles. You'll see what I mean in just a second. That doesn't saying it saying it out loud. Sometimes that happens to me, right? So I think about process in my head. It's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Of course, this is how you do it, and it just becomes like a second nature after I do it a few times. And again, it's just in my head. And when I say it out loud, it's like, well, that that grammatically and conceptually doesn't make any sense at all. So I'll have to rephrase it. But all these lines that I'm placing are kind of following the more natural movement of the skin and the muscles underneath, I guess. But then I'm gonna do a few of those that are going across. Again, it will make more sense when I do them and I show you. But just wanted to mention that that's what I'm gonna be doing. All right, so a few more here. So these ones are kind of like one of the main ones. They don't have as many wrinkles here, but I'm just going to exaggerate a few. All right. I think I'm probably need to do this. All right, so I'm just gonna exaggerate these lines a bit more. I'm gonna reduce the size a bit and just apply a bit more pressure, just to accentuate those lines, because they're very prominent. So, and I'm not gonna make all of them. So I'm not trying to copy the reference. Just the reference is purely to see the placement and the flow of it, but I want to keep it fairly simple, just in an effort to keep it cartoonish enough. Not super cartoonish, not like super stylized, but I always like that in between. I always go for that in between a cartoon, and it could be like a cartoon. Let's say the primary shapes are very, and the secondary as well, but then I go into details that are a little bit like the texture, and this type of wrinkles are a bit more realistic. I don't know. I don't know why, but I just love that idea. So, and it's again something that I enjoy doing. So that's also the reason why I like doing these live sessions with you guys, because it's pretty chill. I get to do stuff that I don't do otherwise. You just test new things. Alright, so let's see how are we with time. We have plenty of time. We have about an hour, so I'm gonna do a few more of these main wrinkles on the side, because they're pretty prominent as well. You see I'm not doing them I'm not doing straight lines in this case, and that's just because I want to refine them with a bit of, make them a little bit more, what's the word, like wiggly. So for example, that's just like a quick rough sketch of, or rough idea of where to place them based on the reference that I have here on the left. But then I'll just go with a bit more care and push them a little bit. But again, it's not a straight line, and that really helps as well with sometimes with the realism of it. Sort of breaking them apart a bit using other lines. That's really the idea. All right. All right. And what I was talking about, the other type of wrinkles, let's just do a few more here. You'll see I'm starting to sort of cross these ones. We could probably add another level of subdivision, just so we have more resolution. So as soon as I start doing these sort of cross lines, it really becomes a bit more realistic. That's a more realistic approach. So the main ones are the ones that are kind of like false. These ones are proper wrinkles. And since I did another subdivision level, I can go ahead and refine this a bit more. Cool. I see some movement there in the chat. I'll just have a look. If you have questions, just put them in there. After I finish this little step, I'll have a look, and if I have an answer for any question now, I'm happy to unsculpting part. I might do them later if I take this to Substance Painter or something like that. I might do them in there. Okay, I'm just gonna do a few more here. I'm gonna turn symmetry just in an effort to save some time. Turn symmetry off, and then just do a few more here. Alright, so I'm just gonna run a quick smooth over some of the end bits of these crevices, and also let's just do a few more here. So these are the ones that are kind of like crossing paths with other wrinkles or with other folds. And again, all I'm doing at this point is just kind of define or setting the flow again, marking in a way, marking the different wrinkles that I'm doing or where I'm going to place them. And then I can go with the damp standard brush, for example, to just refine those and add a little bit of volume, because right now they're very plain. And then smooth brush. I'm using the smooth brush strong. So, I mean, some of these ones are very subtle, but you can already tell starting to look a little bit more polished than what we had. I'm just gonna do a few more here, and I think that'll be it for this, so that I can get to show you some of the fiber mesh stuff. Alright, so let's just go ahead and use the standard brush. And this is just a quick pass to give these main wrinkles a bit of volume, and then just with the smooth brush, just tone it down a bit. You can also do this with the sculpting layers if you want to have more control, and also save a morph target that also gives you even more control over all these details. But again, this is just a quick concept, so don't want to spend too much time on it. At least not right now. I'm more interested in showing you cool stuff, that like little techniques and stuff that actually work or help you in your work, rather than you seeing like the entire process of me creating this monkey. Alright, just turn on symmetry here just to fine tune some of this where I use symmetry. So it's very subtle, just adding a tiny little bit more of volume really. And this is a very similar process that I use in most of the sculptures that I do that have this level of details, or like this type of wrinkles. I shared yesterday on my Instagram page, I shared a stylized version of Roger Waters from Pink Floyd that I'm working on, and this is very similar to, in terms of the technique, it's very similar to that approach that I took. I don't know if you guys saw it, but I don't know, it's just something that I started working. It was just a little guy that I had no intention of making like a likeness or any character really. I just started sculpting, and then I published it, or just shared it on Instagram, and someone, I forgot the name, sorry, suggested that it looked like he said, oh, that guy looks like the fellow from Pink Floyd. And I was like, yeah, you know, some resemblance to him. So yeah, so I decided to just tweak it a little bit using the layers, the sculpting layers, and yeah, turn him into a stylized version of Roger Waters, which I think is looking alright. I'm gonna probably take it. I'll see if I have time, I might give him some fiber mesh, or even with the technique that I'm gonna show you in a second. So you'll see all of this process that I'm doing is just basically with the symmetry off, so that we can make it a little bit more interesting. And the standard brush, I'm just going over the markings that I already did with the damp standard brush, and with the standard brush I'm just adding a bit of volume so that they feel they feel like the wrinkles have actually some weight and not just lines. Okay. Just want to refine these areas a bit more, because they tend to be, you know, this is kind of like a stretching the skin, so they tend to be pulling the skin from both ends. So at least in the center or in the middle, they tend to be quite bulky, this type of wrinkles. And constantly smoothing the surface with a smooth strong. That's kind of like my go-to brush. Not only because I have plenty of resolution now, but also because I don't want to be married to a specific set of, wrinkles. If I need to, I can very easily tweak it. Alright, so I'm thinking like this area right here, it's not looking as good. Maybe I did it too quickly, so I'm just gonna smooth some areas a bit more. Just make these lines a little bit more subtle than what they are right now. Still, so you can see some of them, but not as strong. And I think that works a little bit better. We can also use the clay brush. That one sort of like overrides with the standard brush. The difference between the standard and the clay brush, obviously, is that the clay builds on top of the details. So if I run, you'll see, if I run the clay brush here, it just overrides these details. If I use the standard brush, it keeps them and it just pushes them up. So that's the main difference. So with the clay brush, I can sort of like refine the volumes a bit, still with symmetry off. I'm gonna also increase my intensity on the smooth brush, and I just override some of these details. Alright, so hopefully what I'm doing makes sense for you guys. Let's just work a little bit on the nose, or this nose area. But overall, I think it looks pretty decent so far. It's a cool looking dude. Alrighty. Let's just leave it there. It's really hard to, while you're working, just say like, all right, I'm gonna leave it there. It's one of the hardest things to say, but yeah, I'm gonna leave it there. Let me check the chat to see if you guys have any questions, and we move on to the fiber mesh stuff. Let's do a quick save. Cool. So more RAM 3D. What's up? What's up, more RAM? Mr. Mason, how you going? Good to have you here. Pablo, is the fiber mesh done already, or are you going to polish it? No, we're gonna do it. That's what we're gonna do in the next kind of like hour that we have left. I mentioned at the beginning, it's not gonna be this level of details that you have here in the reference. Let me just chuck that out of the way. Because I want to keep it stylized, and I'm going to show you a couple of techniques and tricks, and I'll mention that in just a second. Stranger Things, cool. Hey Winston, good to have you here. I'm assuming, Winston, you are Winston from the Extra Mile Winston, just because of the surname as well. Good to have you here. Stranger Things, give that stranger feeling. Want to go back in time? Please give me that time machine. Yeah, it's really, really cool. Isla Mayara. Awesome, cool. Monkey Brush, Silver Z. Cool. All right, so no. Why don't you use alphas for wrinkles? Yeah, you could use alphas for wrinkles. I don't want to make it super. I guess you can also use a stylized alpha, but I to be honest, the main reason is because I enjoy the sculpting process. So dragging alphas is not necessarily. I mean, I do it if I have to do something super like specific and very intricate in terms of details. But if you, for example, have a look at the different brushes that I have online and the ones that you can find in the ZBrush Guides website, most of them are not alphas, are not like brushes that you click and drag to create an alpha. They're actually brushes. Just to give you an idea, I was actually using this yesterday with the Roger Waters sculpt. Maybe I can just show you that really quickly before we jump into Dynamesh. Let's have a look. So I'm going to show you something else. So this Roger Waters is kind of like a blend between the old Roger Waters and the young one. So all of these details and all these wrinkles, I'm going to show you how I use them. I don't know if you can recognize him and if you think it looks similar. So I've just been working on this, and let me show you something quickly as well. This doesn't have anything to do with the stream, but just as an idea. So I did like an expression as well, just to play around with that, and that's all in the sculpting layers. But if I turn off, I think only 3 layers, you'll see the face changes completely to the original sketch that I was working on. So these 3 layers are, well, I also moved the teeth, but if I go into solo mode, this is kind of like the guy that I shared online, and someone mentioned, oh, it looks a little bit like Roger Waters, which I thought, yeah, that's kind of like very similar. So I went ahead, and because I have everything in layers, I just took the main shapes a little bit, then a bit of movement and secondary shapes, add some details, and again tweak the kind of like expression on the head. This is just the expression, and that just turned him into Roger Waters, an old version of the young. It's just amazing. It's just something for fun. I'm not, it's not like likeness or anything. It's just a caricature, I guess, or stylized version of Waters. But anyway, the point is to go back in track. So for this guy, for that Roger Waters, I use some of these brushes. These brushes are part of a skin pack that I have in the ZBrush Guides. You've probably already seen it. But what I was saying about going back to the alpha stuff, I have, from all of these ones, just a few of those are kind of like drag alpha. So this one, for example, this is skin damage. I can just go ahead and click and drag it, right? And it creates that sort of skin damage, which is useful if you want to add this detail. The problem with alphas, so this one again is I would use it in a very small percentage, so like little bits and pieces like that across the model after I have a bunch of other details, right? The problem with these alphas or these type of brushes is that I have one that is like that, and then I do another one here and another one here, and yeah, you can change the direction and the strength and all that, but then very soon if you use it over and over, you will be able to identify, oh yeah, that's just an alpha, right? You'll see the same things. That's why I stay away from those. And instead of using alphas, like I said, most of these brushes that I create, I use them as sculpting brushes. So if I select this lip detailer, right, for example, I can very easily go ahead, and this is a sculpting brush that I have tweaked the settings and add an alpha, specific alpha, so that you can create alpha details but without dragging. So it's kind of like a brush that allows you to create other alphas, if that makes sense. So I can just use that to create wrinkles really quickly, right? But I'm actually sculpting, I'm not dragging an alpha. So let me just undo that because I don't want to create this amount of details. But because I'm just using this as a brush, I can just do this type of things, and it's very different than just dragging an alpha. And I use this brush a lot to create this type of more secondary type of wrinkles, because it already interlocks really nicely. but it's a brush. It's not a click and drag alpha. Just to give you another example, let's say these clear skin pores, which mostly you would have around the nose and the cheek area, and yeah, around the mentone and things like that. It's also a brush. So instead of being, click and drag to create a pore, I'm gonna exaggerate it with a large brush. So I can just like go like this, basically paint, and I can just change the direction of the brush, and it basically creates the pores. And if I go over the same area with more pressure, it has that double action brush settings. Again, double action is just something that I made up a couple of years ago. It's not something that you'll find in ZBrush, but it's just to give you that idea that a brush has two different actions depending on how much pressure you applied, how fast you apply the stroke. So these are kind of like double action brushes. And that's how if I'm doing like a concept and I don't have to be very specific placement, I can just do that. Let's say add these details like so, and then I can just go and change to another one, and I have this one as well. So this is a different type of pores that are a little bit more, like a bit stronger. Maybe let's just put them here. But again, it's also a double action brush. So it allows you to create this type of stuff really, really quickly, right? And because it's a double action, it depends on how much pressure you apply. If you apply a lot of pressure, it kind of like spreads the points around. Let me see if that I can show you that. So these are some pores that I'm applying little pressure, right? And I'm just going kind of like in circles around. And if I apply pressure, you get these other type of pores that are kind of like creating the details of the skin. And this is being applied on the surface, so there is not a lot of volume that is being. I mean, you're not adding a lot of volume to the sculpt. It's just adding pores, or like to the surface. Anyway, if you want to have a look at it, you can just get them from the ZBrush Guides website. I think this one is $10. I already forgot. But yeah, so you get all these brushes and yeah, some wrinkles. Maybe let me show you. This one is pretty cool. So these wrinkles also work already. You can, again, it's not a wrinkle alpha that you can just click and drag. You can actually give it direction just by simply using the movement of the strokes, but you get all these wrinkles, right? So just with a couple of, I mean, this is very rough, but with a couple of, strokes, you get something that looks fairly detailed. But anyway, let's go back to the fiber mesh, right? That's what we're gonna be doing. Yeah, so hopefully that answers your question. The reason why I don't use alphas to do this type of wrinkles is because I already have certain brushes that allows me to do that if I wanted to. But to be honest, the main reason is because I enjoy the sculpting process, as like manually detailing, which is pretty, for me at least, it's just a personal preference. Alrighty, so pretty neat, cool. Like the double idea. Excellent. Alright, so let's do some fiber mesh, shall we? Do a quick save. Alright, let's go to the subtool. So this one that was the sketch, I can just yeah, let's just put it in the original folder. It is actually the same as the other one that we duplicated, but let's just leave it there. The other thing is the egg. I'm just thinking maybe we can just run a quick dynamesh on this guy as well, just to keep it clean. A couple of times, and that also will help if I wanted to take this into, like do UV maps and just take it further somewhere else into a different software to create the UV maps. I will probably use the UV master in ZBrush because it's just easier. Let's do another one, but just maintaining something like this, relatively low topology, will really help, especially with the UV mapping. Alright, I think let's do one more. Nah, that's perfect. Cool. Remember, you won't see any of this. In fact, I won't even subdivide this guy because of this egg, which is meant to be like the neck, the rib cage, the everything everything together. Just because you won't see any of that, thanks to the Dynamesh. Thanks to the fiber mesh. So for the fiber mesh, I'm gonna select the head, go into solo mode, and what we need to do now is select the areas that you want to grow the fiber mesh from. So one of the key things with fiber mesh is to be able to kind of like plan ahead and create polygroups to the areas that you want to grow the fiber mesh from, so that when you have the fibers, you can easily groom them. Now, I'm not gonna make too much. I'm not gonna groom them, or I'm not gonna create a style in the hair. It's not a hairstyle. It's just hair. So I'm gonna concentrate more on the settings of fiber mesh rather than on the process of grooming them, if that makes sense. So I'm not gonna worry about the polygroups. And if I need to, what I'll do is just I can create the groups later with the fiber mesh. The only two things that I want to separate is, let's just bring in the references here, and I'm going to show you kind of like how I would separate these fibers. I think this one, for example. So this guy, I think I'm going to separate it into like two categories. So I'm going to have a relatively shorter set of fibers here. Oops. Yeah, like around here. So these are like relatively short fibers that are coming from the cheekbones and the eyes and that sort of thing, and we can use the same to create kind of like some whiskers here. So like the mustache and these ones right here. So that's one set, and the other one obviously will be the rest, which is more like a bulk generation of the fibers. So these ones here, the green ones, will probably do a bit more of stylization in terms of grooming them, but not too much anyway. So let's go ahead and start with those ones first. So I'm going to turn off perspective, and I'm going to use the mask lasso to mask out the areas that I want to kind of like grow them for. So I'm going to hold Control, click and drag, and I'm just going to target those areas. Oops, don't know what happened there. I think it did an autosave. Okay, so maybe that will be too much. I'm going to invert that mask, holding Control, click, and clicking on the canvas. Just going to refine this mask. Oh, I didn't have symmetry. I won't do that. There we go. Alrighty. So now we can go ahead and invert that mask, and we can go to the normal mask pen, and we can refine the borders. So with pressure, we can just kind of like fade this mask. So I'm just gonna use a little bit of pressure to go over the border of the mask and just refine this. And remember, this is just gonna be kind of like a ring of fibers around the face for the green group, kind of like the one that I just showed you. And the reason I'm sort of fading that mask is because we can tell fiber mesh to use the mask, the strength of the mask to grow the fibers. So where the mask is really faint, then the fibers can grow less and shorter. So we can control all that from the fiber mesh settings, and that's the reason I wanted to do this with this character, just to show you can control a lot of things from the fiber mesh settings. I just inverted the mask in here, and instead of painting out, I'm painting in. Same thing here. Just want to add a bit more of this mustache here. And you can totally, I mean, if you want to have more control, you can totally have different masks. So you can just mask this kind of like the lip area to be one set of fibers, and then do the other ones separately. All right, so one more thing I would like to do is just run a quick blur of the mask. So we can do that from the masking palette, right? I can click blur mask. Right now, if I click blur mask, it's just going to be a little bit because we have 4.5 million polygons. So if I want to make it faster, I can just reduce my subdivision level to something like, let's try 3, and then run the blur mask. And you'll see it just blurs the mask a little bit. And I think that's it. Go to the highest subdivision level, and we are ready to roll. We can just create a fiber mesh. Let's see if there's any questions. Cool. Hey Bjorn, Mr. Manson, if you were to put some of those snow ice in fiber mesh, how would you do that? Just insert meshes probably, or nano mesh. There's different ways to do it. Maybe we can, I don't know if we have time, but if we have time, I'll show you. That's fairly simple. You just create you can create the actual snow bit into a plane. Maybe you can UV it and just add a texture. You can create a very low resolution of it, and then a very low resolution mesh of it, of the tiny little piece of snow, and then turn that into an insert mesh, and you can just insert it manually, or you can use nano mesh and apply it to the actual meshes of the fibers. So it's not too complicated. It sounds a little bit complex, but it's not. If I have time, I'll show you really quickly, but let's get into fiber mesh. So I'm gonna open up the fiber mesh palette here, and the first thing I'm going to do is click preview. One thing is I'm gonna turn off solo before I do that, and I'm just gonna turn off this, and let's just leave the eyes, and that's it. Now the main thing about fiber mesh, and I've said that before in the previous stream as well, and when we created the character with the mask, I don't know if you remember that one, is that when you create the fibers, make sure that double from the display properties is off, unless you want to have fibers going through, or like growing from inside on both sides of the normals. And that's really important because it's basically going to create double the amount of fibers here. Right, so if I click preview, ZBrush is going to grow or create these fibers from the points or from the mask that we created. So you see the fibers are kind of like following the mask. The reason they don't look as the default type of fibers is because in the last, this is the same project from last stream, and we just changed the color here. So the base color and the tip color, that's why it looks a little bit different. But I don't remember. I think we changed a few things here, but not too much. We're gonna change that anyway. So if I do a render here right now, there is 132 million fibers. Oh, million? Hang on. Well, 132,000 fibers. What? No, hang on a second. So this is like I'm just doing maths in my head. So this slider is in the thousands. So if you have like 2.1, it will be 2,000. Yeah, all right, that makes sense. So the number 2 means 2,000 fibers. So this is in the thousands. Right. So the more fibers that you have, obviously, the more points that you'll end up with in the subtool that is going to be generated. So I don't want to have these type of fibers. And let me just do a quick render of this so you can see it. And in fact, let's just change the shader. Let's do a quick render. So you'll see how this looks in reality once you do the render, right? So it looks pretty cool. I think it's a very decent kind of like standard or generic set of fibers. So if I like this type of fibers, I can just save the fiber preset and then spend more time like working on it. So I might do that. I don't know at this stage. I'm planning to do something different. That's why I don't want to go for this and just show you something else. But that's pretty much it, right? So instead of using these fibers, what I want to do is reduce the amount or the count of fibers to a very low set of fibers, right? But I'm going to change a few settings here and create kind of like hair cards. And this is the same process that you can use for creating hair cards for video games or you know, real-time characters inside ZBrush. So that's what I wanted to show you today. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and change some settings. So the first thing I want to do is increase the coverage, and the coverage is like the width of the fibers. So now you will see they're a little bit thicker. You can go all the way up to 500,000, and you might need like a wider version of these fibers, right? So if you get to this point and you cannot go any further, it's very easy to tweak this. You can just go to the width profile, and you can just push the root and the tip up, and that will create these more thicker fibers, right? So that's one thing, right? That's one thing that I want to do. I would probably want to reduce this a tiny bit more. So now that I have this curve as, you know, the maximum coverage, I can use the coverage slider to tweak it a bit more. All right, so the next thing is I don't want to have any kind of like tapering in the tip. So I'm going to click on the tip and just click 1, just so that it's flat, and the root as well, 1. So now all of these planes have the same width, are consistently the same width from the root to the tip, and that's just with these two here. There's this little weird one here, but like it's sticking a bit too much, but it doesn't matter. It's a little bit messy, so let's go ahead and change the twist to 0 first. We probably change this as well. Change the gravity to 0, so they're like kind of like sticking out based on the normal. And let's go ahead and also, I think that's fine. Let's we can change the length a little bit. This is gonna be like the ones closer to the face, so probably it's a shorter version of this. Okay. So I think that's looking alright. Let's just do a quick remeasure. A render, and ZBrush is gonna render this plane as thick cubes, right? So that's, I mean, if you want to go for this type of style, actually I don't mind it. I mean, it could be an interesting look, but you'll see that ZBrush is rendering each fiber that was a plane into a cube, right? Each one of those planes was a cube. Oh, sorry, each cube of these used to be a plane. So if I get rid of the render, you'll see they're planes again. And that has to do with the way ZBrush handles fiber mesh at BPR, at best preview renders time. So here under the BPR settings within the fiber mesh sub palette, this is what you control. So this 2 subdivision level means that if you have a set of three polygons, then when you subdivide it, it's going to be divided to a level of subdivision of 2. So you'll end up with, if you have 3, you end up with 6, right? And the sides, that's what it turns it into a cube. So if I change this to 3, right, and I click BPR, this is going to probably give me just a pyramid or like a prisma. See? So now it's a triangle shape. And if you can increase that, right? This is just a process that happens at render time. So this is 8. So you see these tubes here. It's not too bad actually. I don't mind the look of these things, but you know, that's not what I want to show you. So let's go back to 2. Well, not go back to 2. Let's set it to 2 so that when we render it, we have basically planes. That's all we're gonna have, just for the time being. We'll change that later. Now, instead of having the planes, I want to have a texture with a bunch of fibers or like hairs that are going to be driven the detail of this fur. And this is something that you have to do only once. Once you do the first pass on setting up the settings, you can save it and use it in different subtools, so that's pretty cool. Let me just check the chat. I like the new Susan. I'm sure you're referring to the Susan monkey from Blender, which it's pretty cool. I'm getting into it a little bit more in the Eve renderer. Can you adjust the mask while you're in fiber mesh mode? Yeah, absolutely. So this is just a preview. If I wanted to, I can just turn off the preview, go ahead and keep changing the mask, and then do a preview again. It's not interactive, as in like if you draw more of the mask, you will see immediately what that gives you. That's not how it works. You'll have to turn it on and off to see the difference, so see the effect of the mask that you just tweaked. All right. So in order to add that texture, I already have one. I'm just going to show you quickly. I have it here in Photoshop. All I did was just a black image. This is a 124 by 124, and just painted with a harsh brush all of these ones. Again, I want to go for this type of like stylized version, and that's it. I saved this as a PNG or JPEG, don't remember, but this is just a single image, and let's go ahead and import it into ZBrush. So you can import it from the texture palette. I'm just going to click on this fiber mesh texture here, click import, and where do I have it? Over here, my desktop. Cool. So when you first import it, it's going to give you this pop-up saying that if you want to maintain the size of the texture, just for the purpose of the stream and keeping everything simple, I'm going to click yes, and ZBrush is going to auto resize that texture. But then once you create the fibers will come with this UV, so you can just take it into another software and then use a 4K texture if you wanted to. It's going to be depending on the texture. Depending on the UV map that you use. And that's it. All right. So this doesn't look great right now. Let's do a quick BPR. Mr. Manson, why texture instead of the actual fibers? Because this is going to give me a better result with less geometry, which is what I want for the stylized version. But it's the same thing as if you wanted to just use fibers. You'll see in a second that you can totally stylize it and groom it if you want to. And that's the reason why I want to show you, because it's just a different process, and ultimately it's the same thing. It's the same workflow, just with less fibers and with a texture than with more fibers and no texture. So for some reason this thing did it at 4. Let's do it again at 2. Alright, so now we have the texture kind of like applied to the plane. So the next thing I want to do to fine-tune this is get rid of the black areas, and that's the reason why I created the image with a black background, because ZBrush will interpret the black color as transparent, and all we have to do, let's just get a little bit closer so you can see more of the effect here. I can just turn this transparent slider, and as I move it, you'll see it start to sort of clip or cut out the black areas. Right, so hopefully this is going to answer Mr. Sanson question. I'm also going to click on anti-alias so that we have like these nice sharper things. So it's going to look like fiber mesh, but the fibers are not going to be. It's not going to be actual geometry. It's going to be just a texture, but it's going to look the same, or probably better in this case. And you can also, for example, use different masks and different subtools of fiber mesh with different textures, so you get a mix of the type of fibers, which is a bit hard to do with the fiber mesh. You can also, instead of lines, you can just do more like a curly line and create kind of like, just curls around. So let's just do a quick BPR to see how now with the transparency how it looks. So you'll see it looks fairly decent in terms of the detail that we have, right? There are obviously some areas that need some improvement, but that's something that we do after we create it. Now the next thing I want to fine tune is the thickness. So remember we had the coverage at 2.8 if I increase the thickness, because we're using the texture, is gonna kind of like expand it a little bit. Maybe you can, you won't be able to see it, but it's sort of like increasing the reach, so there's gonna be more intersection of the planes and making it look a bit fuller. Let's see if that's the case, just with a quick render. Great. And just finally, again, this is gonna be kind of like the fibers that are closer to the face. We can probably just decrease this a tiny bit, the size, just a tiny bit. Let's have a look. All right, and I'm going to increase the segments. So if you have gravity to, let's say, 1, right, you have the planes sort of like being pulled down by gravity. If you increase the segments, you're basically adding more resolution and allowing ZBrush to sort of like pull it down even more, just because you have more resolution. Let's set it to 8, right? You'll see that go a bit down. That's the reason I put this to 0. And also because at 0, they're just like shooting off straight or perpendicular to the polygon normal. So in other words, if this region here is just a polygon that is in this direction, maybe this one here is in this direction, so this is just like a zoom in version of the polygon, and this one here is in this direction. If you leave the gravity, where is it? The gravity at 0, when you create the fibers, they're gonna shoot off straight from the normal of the polygon. So that's why you'll see these ones are going straight in this direction, these ones are in this one, and these ones like so. So that's really important to sort of like set it up, and then you can just move it if you wanted to after it's created. Because the great thing about this is that we're creating a set of fibers that are very low res, so like hair cards, but then they're going to still have the properties of a fiber mesh, so you can groom them if you wanted to. So that's pretty cool. Some of these kind of like isolated little pieces, we're probably just going to get rid of those later on. I just did an autosave, just need to preview it again. And I think I'm happy with this. You can, if you want to change the color, you just need to change the color of the texture, and that's it. But other than that, I think I'm happy with these 8 segments. If you want to make something a little bit more like curly, is with the twist. So I can increase the twist, and I'll do another BPR just so you can see. If you're doing like a sheep or dreadlocks or something, you can do that with the twist. You'll see it looks pretty cool. It's basically taking the geometry and twisting it around. So that's something that you can do very easily. I'm not going to do that because once I move it around, it's just going to be overridden anyway. Alright, so let's go ahead and click accept. We have about 20 minutes to do a bit of grooming and create the other one. So I'm going to accept that. So now this is its own set of, this is own subtool. So that's great. You'll see it here because we can just, isolate it and work on that. Now, before I move on to tweaking this, I'm just gonna make the rest of the fibers, the ones that are a bit longer. And this is something that should be fairly quick because we already have this kind of like ring around this mask. So all I'm going to do is invert that mask, holding Control, click outside, and actually, let's invert it again. I'm just gonna mask everything on this side of the face, right? And now I can invert it, and now we have the mask for the rest. I'm gonna invert it one more time, reduce the polygon count. I'm just gonna blur it a couple of times, invert that. There you go. So that's the process that I showed you already how to do. There are a few areas that I don't need to grow them from because it's going to be occluded by this guy. So what I can do is invert the mask again, use the mask lasso. I'm just going to mask an area here. right? And this area is just gonna be covered by the body or other fibers really. So this is just in an effort to save a little bit of reduce the amount of fibers really. All right, so I just inverted that. Now we have this one. Let's go ahead and run the same process. Now the good thing about the fiber mesh is that because we're growing them from the same subtool that we grew these other ones, it's actually, it's actually really good because it just keeps, you know, the texture, everything, the settings are the same. So we can just preview it. By the way, you can save this preset, and we can just go ahead and play around more with the length. Just change things a little bit. Like that. It's a little bit more. Anyway, that's good enough. There's some of them that are kind of like spiking out too much. So if you want to reduce the randomness of the length, that's done with the variation here. So next to the length, you have this LEV or level variation. So if you reduce that to 0, you'll see they're a little bit more consistent. The reason this one is probably sticking out is also something to do with these sliders here. So you can play around with those. Let's say set the area to 0, and that will just make it super consistent. Maybe we can just leave it at 0 in the area, and instead we can just add a bit more variation just so that it's not perfect. All right, so that's more like it now. Looks like a lion. So let's just reduce the length a bit. And let's go ahead and bring in or just turn on the other subtool that we already created, just so that we can see how everything is working together. And let's do a quick BPR just before we process this new set of fibers. Comics Legend, how you going, man? If you wanted to save your mask, would you just create a polygroup from that mask to go back to it if needed? That way you don't have to create the mask again. No, I mean, yeah, you can do that. I think I shared in the tips and tricks that I shared on the email for my subscribers. I shared a technique, but something that you can do is just save polypaint in a mask. Let me show you how to do that. We have about 15 minutes, so yeah, I can just show you how to do that because it's something that is fairly important, I guess, to know how to save those masks in case you want to go back to it. Oh, hey Chris, how's it going? Good to have you here. Yeah, so I'm gonna show you that really quickly. Let me just accept this. I'm happy with these fibers. So now we have two set of fibers going here. Let's say I want to keep this mask. All I have to do is go to the let's go to the layers. I lost my layers. Where are they? Layers. Here. So you go to the layers palette, right? I'm actually gonna invert the mask because I want to paint the mask itself. And all you have to do is create a new mask. A new layer. Have to be in the highest subdivision level if you have subdivisions. So just create a new mask and then select a black color. Everything has to be white beforehand, by the way. So, or you can create another layer and just make it white and then do another one that is black. And just click Fill Object. It's not filling it. Let me just do it manually. I don't know why. Might be my macro is playing around. So with a standard brush, right. So let's say this is just polypaint. It's not a mask. Now I can very easily get rid of the mask. So now I don't have any mask at all, but I have this color in my mask. So that's it. I just saved a mask, right? Although it's not a mask, it's just a paint. So I can put this layer back to 0 and just keep working as normal. The only thing is that once you have layers, if you want to change the sculpt in any way, like add details or anything, you'll have to do it in a new layer. But if you want to go back to rescue or take that, recover that mask, it's very simple. All you have to do is go to your layer, which you can name as well. You can call it mask, right? Set it to 1 so that you can see the poly paint, and then you can just go to masking here, and then in the masking subpalette you have this mask by color. So if you open that one up, just click on mask by intensity. You can also probably do it with saturation, but intensity is probably the one that you want. And so you're just going to analyze the intensity of the different values of color. So because you have white and black, it's going to be pretty simple. Mask by intensity. Now we can just go ahead. I just did that. I click on mask by intensity. Now I can turn off the mask, the layer, and your mask is there. That's how you would save it. Hopefully that gives you an idea. I'm gonna get rid of that layer. I don't need it. I'm gonna clear the mask as well. All right, let's do a bit of grooming very quickly. Get out of Solomon. And I also have to do the ones for the body, but I'll just do that after because it's gonna be the same process. I prefer to show you how to manipulate the fibers rather than showing you another process. So before I start, let's just do a quick save. And I'm going to start with the first set of fibers. So with the right. So if I turn polyframe on, you can also go to the texture palette here, and you can turn it on and off. Right. So you'll see this is just a bunch of planes. If you want to do something like more low res, you probably want to reduce the number of segments. Remember, I set it to 10. That's why I have that many. But anyway, this is just to show you that you still have the planes, but they're behaving as fiber mesh. So we can go ahead and bring in, I don't know, something like the hair toss, right? And you can work with the texture on and off. It doesn't matter. So I prefer to work with the texture on because at the end I just need to see. At the end, what matters is how it looks, right? So, so I prefer to see the texture apply. So I'm going to turn this off, and now we can start just grooming these planes like you would with any fiber. So that's pretty cool. I'm going to give it a very quick direction with the toss brush, and then I'm going to select my move brush, which is the one really that I prefer to use for fiber mesh, and I'm going to go to the fiber mesh subpalette here, and I'm going to increase the strength, the preserved strength slider, so that doesn't change the size, reduce the front collision a bit, and now we can go ahead and refine this a bit more. And this is also the reason why I didn't mess around too much with the fiber mesh settings like twist and all those sort of things, because once we use something like this case, basically we're overriding this. We're overriding any twist or anything that we applied in the settings. Alright, so there are a few of these that are not that's something that we can really easily get rid of in just a second. So if I turn this off, you'll see that the planes have an actual nice flow. So some of these ones, what we can do to get rid of those, because they're just like kind of like intersecting the mesh in weird places, we can do something fairly simple. You can delete them. You can just mask by auto group. So every single plane is going to have a different polygroup. That's going to take a while because there's quite a few of these meshes. But something we can do very easily. I'm just thinking there's many ways to do it. I think the easiest way right now would be to go to the brush palette. And let's change to the move topological brush. This is a great tool because since all planes are separate, we can just click on a plane and then tweak that plane on its own. So with this brush, I'm going to do the same thing I did with the other move brush, increase the preserve length, and I'm going to go to the auto mask palette. This is going a little bit quick here because I got to go soon, but I do want to show you this. So in the auto mask palette, we have this switch called the auto mask fiber mesh. If we turn this off, we will be able to sort of move the entire fiber, or the entire plane in this case. Just push it in or select this one and then just, you know, reposition this. Just make sure that when you reposition those, you're doing it from an angle that they won't look kind of like disjointed, or just make sure that they're sort of like touching the surface, I guess. In the same way that I'm doing this, like tweaking these little isolated, you can do the same thing for, you know, other pieces that they're not isolated, but you want to. It's like there's too much gap in here, so you can just push larger polygons like so, or like larger planes, just to refine this area. And the good thing about this is that all of these planes are still what's the name, not the structure, the integrity of the fibers themselves. So these will behave as fiber mesh anyway. Alright, so I'm just gonna do a few more here really quickly. Again, I'm just doing this fast. I will probably spend more time at this point doing things like this. Alrighty. Another thing you can do is also, if you hold Shift, you access the smooth brush, you can smooth out these polygons. So I can use this smooth brush to simplify some of these whiskers here, like the length of it. It's kind of like shorting it, giving it a little trim. Alright, so let's turn the texture on, and we can just see there's a few other places that need tweaking, but again, that's very easy. And I'm using the move topological, remember. Alright, so I'm gonna leave this one here, and I'll use the other set of fibers to sort of do the same thing. So let's go to the other move brush. With symmetry in this case. I don't know why it's so slow. And I'm just gonna try to bring them closer, because these guys, this monkey, it's almost like the hair is like sort of shooting towards the face. It's slow. I don't know why that is. To be honest, I'm running quite a few. I have a few other software open. They're not affecting the Keyshot running. Substance Painter, Marmoset is all on at the moment. Maybe I should, but anyway, it is what it is. Hopefully you see the process is very straightforward, very simple. So I kind of like this one, but in all honesty, I think the files created when I was like changing the settings, like the files, are gonna be a better suit for this. It's gonna be more suitable for this character. Now, one thing that you'll notice is that it's very well defined, the difference between one and the other one. So you can create another rim of a mask and then create new fibers to create like a transition, or alternatively you can go back to this one and let's go to the lengthen, and with the lengthen you can just basically extrude, well, not extrude, sorry, increase the length of just make sure that the auto masking is back to and that basically allows you to increase the length, and it just makes it easier to sort of tweak the transition between one set of fibers and the other one. So that's all I'm doing at this point, just the fibers. I'm gonna go all low, just maybe that helps a little bit, because I had definitely I had the face at a high subdivision level. So that was probably one of the issues. Okay, let's go back to the other set of fibers and change to the move brush. And with a large brush, I'm just gonna fine tune the kind of like the direction of it. All right, let's select the face and let's go ahead and just give it a bit of color and do a quick. I think we're gonna wrap it up here. It's a little bit sluggish. Let's go to the high subdivision level. Oh, come on, frame. All right, and let's do BPR render. Again, the grooming was a little bit, too fast, but hopefully you get the idea of the workflow. It's like anything. It's if you want something to look a little bit more polished, you just need to spend a bit more time doing it. But the process and the steps that I gave you are the same. That's it. I mean, some of these you start to see some of these have like a very concentrated specular, I guess, and that's just because of the plane. So you could potentially use something like the what's the name? The groom turbulence, this one, to just add a little bit of randomness. So let's do that. So here, where you could see more of those, just a tiny bit of those, that will just move the planes a little bit more randomly. So I'm just using the groom turbulence. If you wanted to, let's say that maybe this, like looking at the reference, this color is too strong. I'm just gonna do a quick version here. Just make it a little bit lighter, and I'm just gonna crunch the levels a bit more. It's gonna be wider, I guess. And I'm gonna save that as a JPEG. I'm gonna call it fibers monkey 2 or fibers 2. Cool, and save that. So now, because although this is already a fiber mesh, we should be able to just turn on and off the texture. So all I did was just create the same file with different color. We go ahead and import that. So it's slightly lighter, but from here you can do the same thing. Just increase the transparency, anti-alias, more transparency, and I'll do the same thing for this one. And if you think, for example, that this set of fibers is too thick compared to the other one, what you can do is to this set of fibers just reduce the amount of fibers that you add. So let me just show you what I mean by that. I'm gonna do it very rough, but just quickly in Photoshop with a brush, soft brush. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with my computer now. Look at that. Even selecting a brush takes a while now. I'm gonna have to restart it. Again, to be fair, I have a few things running and I'm streaming and I haven't restarted it for like a few weeks. So Yeah, so I'm gonna use this brush, this size, and I'm gonna remove some of those. Again, this is very rough, not the way that I would advise you to do it, but at least to show you what I mean. Right, so not as many. Let's do, I'm gonna save this again, JPEG Fibers 3. Yes, okay, go back to ZBrush, and so in this case I'm just gonna import a different texture. So that's another advantage of this. Click open. All right, so now this brush has this texture has less hairs, so I can just reduce anti-alias, increase transparency. So I basically just reduce the amount of hairs by simply changing the texture. Let's do a quick render, and just to wrap up this here and see how that works. You'll see the color will be different just because of the texture. Another great advantage of using this technique, as in using fibers, but I mean using texture by driving the texture details with the with fibers. There you go. That's kind of it. How it is. I'm just thinking. Yeah, let me just do it again. That's more like it. Alright, so it just increase the transparency, but you'll see it looks quite interesting, and we have a fairly low amount of polygons. The texture even is really really rubbish. I didn't spend too much time on that. But another great thing about this process is that you can take exactly the same texture that you created for grooming the fibers and get this result, right? Exactly the same map, and then you can run it through, I don't know, like there are many different software that allows you to do that. I'm just, from the top of my head, I would use Substance Alchemy to just extract kind of like a set of maps from it. So you can do a normal map, or you can do an ambient occlusion, and then you can take this exact same project in the low-res format, send it to real-time engine, Unreal, whatever it is, and then use those maps to, like a normal map, to actually add a bit more of depth to these fibers. But that's it. That's all there is to it. I would probably, if I have time, just sort this out a little bit better to get a bit more of more of these whiskers, or like more stranded little hairs around here. But overall, I think it looks pretty decent for the amount of time that we spent grooming them. It's all about the settings in this case, and and driving the texture. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy this stream. Like I said, it's pretty cool for me to just hang around here with you guys. Thank you so much for stopping by. Mr. Sanson, how do you export it? Just an FBX. Just go to the C plugin, FBX, export visible, whatever is visible, or selected, or all, whatever you want. Export that, and that should do it. Any FBX, most real-time engines. If you want to do it in a real-time engine, you will just do it with an FBX. I guess that's the easiest thing. Yeah. So hopefully, you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for stopping by. Thank you to all my students that stopped by here. Chris, and who else was here? Winston. Yeah, thank you for stopping by. Anyway, by the way, so if you guys so like I said, there's some of my students are in here from the Extra Mile. So that's the course that I launched a week ago. It's been a week. That's great, and it's been absolutely fantastic. Like, the interaction of the people in the community is great. Just so you know, I'm planning to, once I truly help the people that are already in the course, I'm planning to do another launch later on this year. So if you're interested, you can just go to the 3dconceptartist.com website, and you can just register your interest. I will let you know once it's open. Alrighty, so I hope you enjoyed this stream, and I'll probably spend a few more minutes on this guy, just polishing it up, and I'll post it somewhere in the social media or whatever, so you can see the final result. But if you want to refer back to this and the previous stream, you can just watch it on Pixologic channel as well. Alright, take care guys, and I'll see you next. Oh, by the way, is this the final stream? Sorry. So yeah, so this is the final stream of the month for me. Next month I won't be able to do it on Fridays, but yeah, I'll just double check the schedule. I will share online again the new schedule for the next month, but it's gonna be different. It's not gonna be on Fridays, probably the same time, but in a different day, Thursday or something like that, just so you guys know. Alright, take it easy and have a good one. Enjoy the weekend.